Everyone. My name is Andrew Parsons, and what I should say, actually, let me start again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you are in the world, because I am in Seattle, but I know even some of our panelists are not in the same time zone as I am. So I just want to welcome you all, regardless of where you are, what your time zone is, and I hope you're having a great day or evening. My name is Andrew Parsons. I am the PMM lead for programmers here at Unity, and I have the special privilege for moderating this awesome webinar to talk about some of the true costs and tips for creating a game from end to end. Now, when people think about creating a game, they often think just about the building part, the building phase of writing code, dragging objects on screens, maybe testing it to make sure it does what it's supposed to do. But creating a game is so much more than that, from prototyping and concepts to live operations and player engagement, and even marketing is a factor, right? So we're talking about the entire life cycle. Where are the things that you need to sort of think about when you're building a game from end to end? And so today we invited 4 great game creators with us to discuss that end-to-end life cycle. And to talk about their own personal hands-on experiences and to share with you and answer some of your questions about some potential mistakes and costs that you ought to be aware of so you can work to meet the challenges right up front before they actually adversely affect your development. It's always better to address it before it happens, before it gets to be a big problem. So who have we got today? Let's check this out. So hopefully we'll change to the all in view so you guys can see all these lovely faces. But in alphabetical order here, we have Freddie, the CTO of Radical Forge, Neil Jones, aka the Aerial Knight, Olav, the creative director of Zoink Games, and Ted is the president of Unknown Worlds. Welcome, guys.
Yo, what's good?
Yeah. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
So what we're going to do today, guys, is talk to you 4 and hopefully our audience around the entire life cycle. We're going to talk about prototyping all the way through to live ops. Before we begin, I do want to highlight the audience that this is your opportunity to ask questions today to these people. We're going to spend about 45 minutes doing this particular thing, all stages of development. But we're going to have a few more minutes at the end for other questions that we may not have answered. We may not get to answer everything, but please put your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom call because the chat is already pretty lively and we may miss a question there. So put it in the Q&A section and we'll address it if we can, time permitting. Let's get into it. So there are many ways to slice and dice the modern game development process. But at Unity, we usually look at it like this: prototyping or concepting, a pre-production phase, production, then launching the game, and then live operations. All of that stuff is the way you can typically sort of bucket things. You can bucket it different ways, but that's how we're going to approach it today. So let's just dive straight into that first phase of prototyping. Panel, you guys ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing because you guys don't need to see this. Stop. There we go. All right. So, prototyping. What a great sort of way to start, because a lot of people don't even do this. So I want to just start with a really juicy question. Let's get into it. What is the one challenge you faced during your initial game concepting phase that you'd prefer not to have to deal with again? So let me start. Ted, you're not on mute. Let's start with you. Do you have anything to sort of put in here?
And what do I wish was easier? I wish that it was simpler to find that idea, and find something that was actually worthy of kind of putting into pre-production. I think it's so difficult to come up with an idea that you're both passionate about and you think is going to work and find an audience, right? it's just, yeah, it's just one of the hardest things in anything creative, right? And I think it's hard to say, like, it's also super fun, of course, right, to try so many different ideas and see what resonates. But I mean, that's really the hardest thing, is just finding the fun. That's what we always call it, right? Is like, how do you find something that you think is just really fun for 5 minutes, then try and build on that and find the right foundation, define the pillars. It's just, I think that's a really tough question, but that's just the hardest part, is finding the thing that you want to make.
So, okay, what about some of the other guys here?
Well, I wish, I mean, I wish we had less pressure to pay salaries when we started out with our last game, Lost in Random, because it was a very fun creative process in the beginning. Like Ted said, like finding a fun idea. We had a lot of sketching going on. We had many artists that were looking for, like a lot of artists twiddling thumbs at that time. So there was a lot of concepting very early on, and looking at drawings, finding, we wanted to explore this dark fairy tale, and we found a painting of a girl with a big die, and that kind of sparked the whole game idea. Everything kind of sparked out from that painting. Before, it was just a walking simulator, basically, and then we had this whole combat loop slowly growing out of the die, and it was so much fun. But at the same time, we really had to pitch the game and make some money to not have to fire people or something like that. We turned to EA Originals, who we had worked with previously with Fe, another EA Originals title, and they were great and liked the concept. We pitched to several others as well. But yeah, I wish we had slowed down and argued for more time for pre-production. We didn't have a proper time for pre-production. Many of us felt like to really give us proper time to think out all the structures, all the systems, and because some stuff came trickling in afterwards during development. We're like, no, we're not supposed to come up with this thing right now, that we really need this thing. How do we solve that? And that can cause later releases and so on.
So do you take those ideas and then bank them for other projects, or are they kind of like sort of left on the cutting floor?
No, it's more like we realized that, we really need this feature for this to work at all. and we should have thought of that before, because we were so stressed out. We usually at Zoink back then, now we're part of the Thunderful development studio, and we're restructuring a lot of stuff, how we work. But back then, our usual process was to create a prototype that looked really great and kind of like a really great, a playable mock-up, basically.
Right.
And that we would use to pitch to bigger publishers. And that could be really effective and really helpful. It helped us with Ghost Giant, and it becomes like our reference game as well. We can always look back at that demo. But then again, it is also can be quite costly in the way that we had to remake a lot of stuff. We create this really gorgeous mock-up without all of without the whole plan, basically, and then we have to come up with the rest of the plan once we have sold it.
Freddie, I want to ask you, has there ever been a situation where in the concepting prototype phase, you've had this great idea, shower thought, fun, and then it's like, oh man, something happened, right? Feedback on the concept was poor, the mechanic just wasn't going to work with the platforms you're targeting, and you had to pivot to another strategy? Like, how do you handle that this early in the process?
Well, we're not afraid to try something, so we'll have an idea for something, be like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. Like one of the mechanics that we wanted to explore in Brightpaw was have a system where the camera and world would completely flip upside down, and then you can play the entire world like inverted. We tried that, and it took about a week, probably 2 weeks to implement, test, and ultimately we decided it wasn't the best thing to be in the game, so we ended up just scrapping it completely. And most of our like, I guess, ideas we do end up trying to try out, but whether they stay in the full game or not is depending on whether it's actually fun and works for the game that we want to make.
So it sounds like there is a bit of an opportunity cost during prototyping, right? That, hey, we want to explore creativity as much as possible before we get into pre-production. We do need to get into the business of building the game, And sometimes like, it's not just, hey, I've come up with a great idea, let's move on. It might be, I've come up with 10 great ideas and 50 bad ones. I got to spend time to sift through all that. Just before I switch over to pre-production, there was a question in the audience that was about whether there should be a reflection on the actual team structure in the concept phase. Based on the concept that you settle on, do you think about rejigging your teams at all? Anyone can answer this one if they have a response.
Yeah,
please go ahead, Olaf.
Oh no, oh yeah, no, but yeah, I think it depends a lot on for us. For instance, Lost in Random was a very narrative-driven game, and I'm into narrative, and I was a narratively inclined game director at that time. So it made sense for me, for instance, to direct the game then at least. But then we have other games in Vida where it's more about all about really great combat or mechanics, and then in Lost in Random, for instance, we didn't. I kind of took both hats of narrative direction and just as a personal reference. So depending on what people you have and what different skill sets they have, and also the concept of the game. I would certainly say that from the very beginning, it kind of sets the core team for us at least. Yeah.
Awesome. Ted, did you want to add anything?
No, I think he answered it beautifully. I think that's exactly right. And depending on the game, it really, just that's what implies, or kind of informs what the exact team structure you need. And we always, that is exactly the right time to sit down and say, what are the roles that we absolutely need here from the get-go to make this game successful? Absolutely. Yeah. And it is just different for every game. Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's switch to the next chapter in the development life cycle and think about pre-production. So we've got our concept. Does actually for you guys, does concepting and prototyping actually occur differently to pre-production? Are they merged together? How does that work for you all?
It's a super distinct process for us. They're very different things. I think the concepting, you're doing your best to define the what you're going to attempt to build in, pre-production. And then pre-production just has a lot more process to it about kind of, that's when you actually get into maybe that beautiful corner or that vertical slice, right? You really have the pillars well defined and are trying to express them. We consider them incredibly different things. And there's just a lot more definition, not far from all the questions being answered, but a lot more definition when a game enters pre-production, when concepting is really just a purely creative spitballing process for us.
Awesome. Neil, you haven't weighed in yet, so I'm going to ask you this question. So pre-production is kind of like where technology choice is fully mapped out, team structure is determined, as I was just talking about, that kind of stuff. What do you believe is the most crucial component to pre-production to make sure that production will run smoothly?
Well, for me, I'm more solo-ish type of dev, so I don't have a giant team or a lot of people around me to kind of organize that way. So the concepting, pre-production kind of folds into each other. Anything that I do in the concepting phase, even if it's a game that I choose not to move forward with, I kind of use that for whatever I do kind of move forward with, just as a time-saving measure. And all of that kind of just flows into that production, so that I have things to draw from. So anything that I come up with in the concepting phase, is a cool, solid prefab or mechanic that I can maybe use later in production of the game that I'm actually going to go forward with.
And as a solo dev, Neil, I know a lot of other indie devs, solo devs can sometimes overlook pre-production. What would be the number one piece of advice for everyone here about how critical it is to do pre-production?
I think it's not that they overlook it. It's just that they move a lot faster because the decision-making process when it comes to that kind of thing is just a lot faster, since, you know, they have the burden of all the decisions, right? Their only approval is themselves. So in that sense, I would say that it is a very important step. And I think people do kind of do it. They just don't know that they do it. So organizing, you know, their thoughts and the steps that they take
Sure.
is more of the kind of advice or feedback.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else want to add something to someone maybe who has a team and has a different perspective? Freddie?
So during pre-production for us, we mainly want to look at like the tools that our dev team will be using throughout the main development. And there's bound to be other tools that we want to make that we haven't thought of whilst we go through production. But ideally we want to make the lives of our designers, our artists, as easy as possible so they can actually get to the actual creative element during full production. So we try to front load pre-production with just tools planning and development.
Right.
Right. Really important to also document it clearly for people coming on the project later for onboarding. We're currently using Confluence with these very neat different categories, and get started, meet the project, meet the team. And for those who want to dive in deeper for more detail, can do that.
Yeah. Documentation, obviously. I agree there that you should, the more you can document out during this pre-production, production's going to go way smoother. I just want to double back, Freddie, just for a second before we move to the next section. Someone in the audience asked, at what point do you decide how to implement something? You know, for example, there's many ways to develop a character controller. When do you make that decision of this is how? I'm asking you specifically because you kind of touched on it a little bit just then.
There's no real one way or right way to like make a system or a feature. And for us, we kind of just, it's a really bad answer. We kind of just go for it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, then we go like, why doesn't it work? Can we fix it? If not, we should try one of the other approaches.
Yeah, I think talking a lot is like a major hang up at like a lot of places where, you know, there's so much all the time you spend discussing how you can do something, you could have did it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, cool. Great answers. Thanks, guys. Let's move into production, right? So now we're actually building the thing. I want to ask a couple of interesting questions here. I think the first one is pick a team member, pick a role in your team, or Neil, it's going to be you, some sort of thing that you do. Programmer, designer, artist, the DevOps guy, you know, the system admin girl. What's the typical day in the life for them? How much time is spent doing the typical aspect of their work? So a programmer, how much time do they write code and how much time do they do other things? Ted, I'll give you a chance to start first.
Oof. Well, I mean, I think the best way to think about it is like for programming as an example is we obviously want our programmers programming as much as they possibly can. And so we certainly aim for them to be able to spend, you know, 80+% of their time on that. But at different phases in production, it just isn't possible. It just kind of depends on what you're doing and where you are. But we try to minimize meetings and try to minimize the talking. I just couldn't agree more strongly with Neil's point that like, it's far better to iterate 3-4 times and do it quickly than it is to kind of plan what you're going to do. But yeah, that's certainly our hope is that technical folks, artists do spend 80% of their time plus in their kind of core specialty, and then contributing with the rest of the team and doing the other things, you know, kind of that other 20% of the time.
And that's what you strive for. What's reality?
Really just depends. There are times, you know, I think where people would say that they actually absolutely achieve that. You know, it depends where we are in like the production and what's happening at that moment and what challenges we're facing. Because like later in the process, there's a lot more play testing, a lot more refinement, and it results in a lot more meetings and, you know, these sorts of things, or, you know, as we'll get to, like kind of launch planning and things, you know, it just changes. but that's what we try to do, right? We want people spending as much time as possible doing what they're best at.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, like, for anyone to answer, but I guess if everyone is doing their job as efficiently as possible, then it lessens impact on other team members, right?
That's hard, you know. I mean, it's just such a difficult answer. I mean, because we are fortunate, you know, we're a full production team for us is roughly 20 to 25 people, you know, at our studio. You know, and so like another way to think about it is like we have leads for every discipline, right? So we have like a tech lead, right, and you know, of course, an art lead. And those are the folks that obviously I think it kind of inverts, right? They probably only get to spend 20% of time doing the thing that they love, right? Because they're actually tasked with making their team as effective as possible and trying to get them to spend as much of their day as they can, you know, doing their best work. So it really just depends on the role, but that's, you know, I'm super aware that's quite a luxury, you know, for a team our size compared to other folks.
Yeah. Cool. Anyone else want to add to that, or?
No, it sounds very similar with the thinking, but it sounds similar.
All right, cool, awesome. I think that's a really good insight. You know, I always think that, you know, there's always a, you know, debugging or debating with design, the programmers debating with design about how to implement something, telling the artist that their image is in the wrong dimensions, and the artist is like, no, it's not. Like, there's all that little extra opportunity cost of being in a team and trying to figure those things out. So whether it's the lead spending more of their time or it's other people, I know it's a cost that people sometimes overlook and think that they're just going to do their job, you know, all day. This is one of my favorite questions I ask anyone who creates games, and that's, everyone has a favorite bug, right? So I want to ask if any of you would be willing to volunteer what your favorite bug is, or was, and whether it changed the direction of your project or were you able to ultimately fix it?
Oh, my favorite, well, favorite-ish, the thing I hated the most was that when Never Yield first launched, the last level is very music-based. The perspective changes depending on what part of the song you hit, right? So, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You play the game, at this part of the song, it jumps to another part of the game, right? What I didn't think of was that you can mute the music in the game. So if you play that level with the music muted, nothing happens. You just kind of just run endlessly into nothing.
I thought you were going to say it was that it was almost impossible to do because you couldn't do stuff in time with the music, but you're saying because the music was muted, there was no barrier.
Yeah, there was no checkpoint to jump because like the music plays such a heavy role. I just thought, what monster would ever mute the music of this game?
No, Neil thinks some of his players are monsters. Okay. Anyone else have a great little bug?
I actually have one about music as well. There's a level in Lost in Random where it's a very sad scene. You're in a very dark, gloomy forest. Something horrible has happened, and the characters that you're playing is crying, and you're walking slowly through this forest, and we have this. We carefully place out all the music tracks where, especially in these kind of narrative moments where a specific track should play here. And in this case, there was supposed to be some very sad cellos tugging at the heartstrings, telling you what to feel. And we had some mysterious bug that caused, you know, if you progressed from one level to the next, sometimes the music in the very start of the level wouldn't play. We thought we had fixed all of those cases, but it made it, in this case, it made it to the final game that the music doesn't play there in the beginning. So it's just dead quiet, the music, and it's actually pretty effective. It's just very, you feel very uncertain, I hope, and it feels very just so dead and depressing. It's no music at all, and then you're sneaking past these patrolling mechanical spiders, and you're hiding out from them. And then when you think you're out in the clear, there's this jump scare, a big spider jumping in front of you, and then suddenly this fanfare, because it's a cutscene, the music plays and works. It's like, bah! And I think if it wasn't for if we had the music there would have been a smoother transition into the jump scare. But now it's really mean, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad. But I thought definitely had a different effect.
So you left that in?
Yeah, I mean, we had no choice. It was released, and we haven't been able to make a patch. But if you want to hear the actual music, if you play the game, it's in Forberg, the 4th chapter. You just need to quit the game and restart, and then the music plays. But yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, Ted, Freddie, I want to give one of you an opportunity as well. Do you have a bug that you laugh about or you cry about? Think, oh my God, I don't want to do that ever again.
Well, the one that it's a collection of bugs really that I just love is the whole speed running community that emerged for Subnautica. And one of my favorite aspects of it is, in one patch, we fixed one of the bugs that is being exploited to cut, tens of minutes out of a game gameplay through. And then our email and our Discord just blew up. And we put the patch out like, you've ruined speed running for the game. Like, what's happening? And we actually intentionally went back and put the bug back in so that they could continue. But we love that stuff. I mean, because it doesn't really alter the experience for the vast majority of players, but it just makes it so much more fun for people. So all kinds of speed glitches, it's constantly amazes us the stuff people come up with to find little kind of very bad bugs actually in our code when you really think about it, but it makes for all these wonderful kind of experiences. It's fantastic.
What's the current record?
Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculously fast. I think people are doing it in 7 or 8 minutes or something crazy. It's insane. It makes no sense.
Hurts the soul, right? Hurts the soul.
Yeah, we made a very small game. Now, I mean, it's incredible. And anyway, I love that stuff. It's such a fun community. Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to move us on. I want to ask one last question on production, which is, feature creep is a thing. We all know that. How do you control your excitement in wanting to build cool new things? And how do you stick to that original script? Like, do you have particular people in the team that keep you to task, or do you all collectively agree, or do you let feature creep happen?
A super great producer that always goes through your document with like, hey, what about why don't we have 10 spaceships and you can get 1 spaceship or like I don't know, just a great producer springs to mind that also understands what what can see what will make the game really pop and make it great, but then okay, you can have these 2 spaceships, but then you got to cut the mechanical spider over there or
Anyone else want to add to that? Good producers.
I agree with Olaf. Just because like our production team and like the directors on whatever game project that they're working on will have the power to say no, especially to like an instance of a person wanting to add like 100 skins for the player to be able to like unlock. And there's not going to be like resources or bandwidth to be able to like test and make sure that the skins don't break in any weird ways. So
yeah, awesome. I know we need to run to the next section, but I do want to ask one of the audience questions, which I think is a really cool one, which is, what's the biggest difference between game development and standard software development for anyone who's done both?
Oh, I've done both. Standard software development, there's the goal is a lot clearer. So for like individual app development, because I did a lot of automotive apps here in Detroit, it's straightforward. It needs to do a task, make sure it does that thing. For game development, there's so many branches and paths to go down, and people you're trying to please. So it's a lot messier. And the platforms, making it for multiple platforms. I know we're going down that route later, but that adds to the mess.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, let's talk about launch. We've now finished building our game, and we're ready to go, right? Like we just click a switch and we're done. Is that how launch works for you guys? I know I'm being a little facetious. What are the basic steps you need to follow when you do launch your game to the world?
I mean, we had the EA. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, that's all you.
Oh well, I was gonna say that EA Originals did it for us, but we still had to take into account. You know, we still had our own wishes. We wanted to, because it was a very art-driven project. You have a great opportunity to show sketches and progress sculpts, or all that kind of stuff. And we had a really golden opportunity to build up this image of like a creative, wacky claymation, but in video game studio. But I feel like we kind of missed that opportunity. We had a few people working on marketing, and we kind of counted a little bit too much on the originals, who had like a grander plan. They did great and had great stuff going on there, but we should have taken the initiative to post more progress. So if you like, I feel like if you have especially if you have art, lots of interesting art for your game, go ahead and share that along the way and create some buzz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's never enough marketing. You never planned early enough. You didn't reach out to enough streamers. It's so many things, but this launch is half about your game, mostly about marketing though. Saying the right things, knowing who to interact with and who not to interact with, because there's a lot of toxic people out there. So it's rough, and like not taking it too hard, because no matter, like, you can make the best game in the world, people gonna yell at you about something, and you're gonna get your feelings hurt no matter what. So yeah.
Are there any particular obstacles you guys encounter during launch? Like, yes, okay, we all have the little things, but is there something that keeps you up at night that this is a super exciting time, but like you dread this one thing happening?
Like a big game hit coming from nowhere and stealing the spotlight when you're about to release
another game coming out.
Some really great games came out the same week as Lost to Random. It was like all the best to those games. Those are great games, so that's always scary. There's so much luck. You can plan a lot, and of course I'm not of course trained in marketing that way, but there's a lot of luck, from what I understand, involved, and praying to the launch gods. The old ones.
I had the most unlucky week, actually. My update, the launch trailer for the update, I had this whole launch plan, and it just happened to come out the same day as the surprise Nintendo Direct. So it got buried. And then the actual launch for Xbox and PC was the other day, the same day as the surprise Cyberpunk update that just came out. So yeah,
those pesky surprises. What about other like things when you're launching your game, right? You've built your game, but there's also, you just mentioned one thing, Neil, which is platform availability, or like there's certain extra things, steps you have to step through there. But also like maybe multiplayer infrastructure for leaderboards and competitive play, achievements. Any of those things more problematic than, or more challenging than you expected when you build your game? Oh, sorry, launch your game. Ted?
I don't think those things hopefully, well, let me back up one step, I guess. I think, when you say launch, it can mean a lot of different things, and then and one of the things we love is early access. That's how we've, launched all of our titles and are planning our next game that way as well. And it's kind of, it's kind of a cheat code for a lot of things. I think it teaches you how to launch when you're not really launching. And it gets you into kind of a cycle where you have an opportunity to do all these things in the open and continually add to your project while getting incredible feedback and building a community. So I think those types of things, we're really fortunate with our approach to be able to layer it in as we go. Maybe you don't need those things, right, when you just first go out in early access, but you can choose, some milestones along the way to include them, so that it isn't this enormous rush of list of 30 things that you need on launch day that maybe you haven't, thought about or included along the way. That's just one of the many, many benefits we find. Again, it's a very game specific, of course, but we find that works really well. with getting into an early access rhythm and doing regular releases and really working with the community to try and refine the game to make it as enjoyable for as many people as we possibly can.
Do you plan your early access like time period? You're like, we actually really want to be live at this, like in October, so we'll early access in April. Is that?
For us, we're much more intentional with when we begin early access. We have ideas about how long we think we want to spend in early access before getting to 1.0 or whatever you want to call it, kind of the full launch. But we really just want to listen to the game. Then like another benefit of early access for many titles, right, is it can help with funding, right? Like you can charge for your game then, and if you're unexpectedly successful with early access, like we were very fortunate to be with Subnautica, it actually allowed us to have a longer early access period than we'd hoped, right? Wow. And it kind of, just was kind of a very kind of fortunate circumstance for it. It just, we spent a lot more time in early access than we had planned, and I think the game's a lot better for it. But again, that's, that was very, very, very lucky. I think Olaf's point is true. Like this industry, there's a ton of luck. But that's how we think about it. But we have a game coming up that we're planning on early access later this year. We have an idea of when we want to be at 1.0, but we just want to really listen to the game.
Sure. That's cool. Good insight. And that actually leads me on to our next phase of the life cycle, which is live ops, live operations, which early access, I would argue, is a little bit in that sort of bucket. And it's the lifeblood of many modern games. I hear often about studios who dedicate as much time, if not more, to the running and updating and enhancing of their game post-launch or post-early access. When you guys begin planning, how do you go about forecasting how much budget you'll need to dedicate post-launch?
I could just say that I think I might be saying something stupid here, but I think it can be quite simple for a linear kind of story-driven game, because there's an end, and then hopefully it does well, and you make a DLC or an expansion or a second game or whatever. So for me that kind of stops there. But of course, bug fixing, it's difficult to know, I would say.
I think there's a lot more sense of winging it in game development than people realize. Like me, I didn't plan on doing an update until I got a lot of that feedback and got interest from my publisher in doing it, and pull some trickery to kind of pull it off. But I think you can't really plan for a lot of stuff, because you can have the best game on paper, but you don't know if people are going to actually like it or not. So you can't really plan for, all these additional things. I mean, you can plan for it, but the chance of it happening is so random. That you kind of just gotta see how it goes, a lot of times. And I know that's not like a really good answer to kind of put on a marketing plan or anything like that. But that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same for like both artists and programmers. They reach a block where it's so unknown how long it might take to solve a problem, and it feels like a waste of time. But then when you get on the other side, you realize, oh, it was part of the process.
Ted, Freddie.
For live ops, for this specific section, we actually we are planning our next big game, where we actually have a fairly significant live ops segment, and we've penciled in just a bunch of question marks at the end of the game launch for this will be either community driven based on feedback, or this will be actual content that we have planned that wasn't shipped with the 1.0 release. So we are trying to still keep some flexibility in the actual plan for what the community would want, because at the end of the day, it's the community that's going to play our game, and obviously pay for the game.
Yeah, fair. I'm actually going to ask the next question on all four of you. And I'll just run across my screen. So question is, I call this pick your poison, right? If you can only do one live ops activity, what would it be? And I'll give you some examples. There's content management, telemetry to see how your game's performing, DLC / in-app purchases, so you can add on content, user-generated content, so you're allowing your players to add content, player retention or engagement, something else. So think of that, some one thing that you would do in live ops if you only could do one thing. Neil, you're first.
DLC, but I don't believe in paid DLC. You getting people back to the game at the original price rather than lowering your price and adding another thing for them to download.
Ted?
It's a really tough, I think, this is, I think, very game specific, like, and depending on what you're making, why, but I mean, something that we simply couldn't live without ever is telemetry. Because it's just so useful to us in trying to refine the game, all through early access and beyond. So yeah, I think that's just incredibly important to making the best possible game.
So did you say me?
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, again, like, yeah, DLC expansion or, yeah, something that, because it's so much fun to see people reacting to your stories and characters, see what actually landed, and often it's quite unexpected. Oh, you found this scene very scary, and or like, oh, we want to do something about that character. Yeah, so I just long to make more based on people's reactions. Yeah,
and given the depth of some, the types of things you would do you pay DLC or free DLC like Neil?
It depends on our budget and what the size of the DLC expansion or yeah, our needs. But of course, I feel like we don't want to what do you call it? I don't want to rob people. We should feel worth it.
Fair. Okay. And Freddie?
Probably UGC. This is more for our potentially next project. But just seeing even like our internal teams, what they can creatively come up with a small amount of building blocks that we give them has been really astonishing. And that in the parallel players' hands, they can come up with stuff that we can't even dream of.
Yeah. So it's fascinating, right? I'm hearing like DLC and enhancing the game that we have to create a better experience or a more immersive experience or a longer experience. We're talking about telemetry, making sure the game is performing at the right level so we know how our players are using our game and engaging on it. And then UGC, like that's like, sort of a holy grail for some players is I want to create you've given me the world and the tools to do it, but I want to be able to create. And it kind of gives them a little chance to be, a game creator themselves. So it's such a great spectrum there. And then, as I said, there's other things as well, like, player retention as well, or content management, things that are going there. So if I think about player retention, how important is a first impression today? Like we hear about some games like, hey, Cyberpunk, we just mentioned earlier, right? That launched and first impression wasn't great, right? PlayStation 4, we don't talk about. But, like obviously fans, and they've continued to work on it, and arguably, yesterday or earlier this week, fantastic experience. How about you guys? What player retention, first impressions, how important is that first impression?
There's a difference between first impression and hype. I think that's where the Cyberpunk issue falls within. I think that the like the comment just said, No Man's Sky is a really good example of that as well. I think that people got to realize the internet's not a real place. And you have to be more realistic. Just because you're getting yelled at online about something or people don't like a certain thing online doesn't mean that's going to affect you negatively. That might just be potential new marketing to say, hey, now I fixed it. What do you think now? So I kind of think all news is good news within a certain range. But if you get people talking about your game, either way, you're doing better than most.
That's great. Anyone else? Awesome.
And I think especially if you're launching like a new IP and you're a studio that might not have as an established title as The Witcher or the hype No Man's Sky, and you definitely need several small and big good first impressions from like the Instagram post with the first frame of a trailer that you see. If someone just has 1 second of attention span, it needs to be really eye-catching. I saw It Takes Two's color scheme, I think, was a bit more powerful than Lost in Random, for instance. I think because it was like orange and like very very intense. Also Knockout City, which is also in the Originals title, and like your eyes like colors. And I think Lost in Random was quite dark, so maybe for the first frame at least I think there's room for dark games, and I might be wrong, but maybe some first colorful splash page could have helped. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask one last question because I'm looking at the time, and then I'm going to go through a bunch of the audience questions. And that question is, how do you determine your game's success? You've launched your game, you're operating it. What does success mean to you?
I mean, I'll go first if
Yeah.
I'll buy you guys some time. So for me personally, my game really didn't cost anything to make. So right off the bat, it coming out on multiple platforms was a win for me. Getting the attention and backing that it did. Most indies don't get anything close to kind of the support that I received, which I was super grateful for. But the overall success, it's just over time seeing if people kind of come back to it, because the goal of the game was to bring people back into this genre that no one's really done anything with for a while, even if it's just for the music or just to compare it to, another runner type game. And to kind of change things to see if there was a real want for that kind of genre that no one was doing anything with. And if there is a want and a need for that kind of experience over time, then my game will be in like the perfect place to kind of come up with a sequel or DLC that people can gravitate towards.
Yeah, awesome. Anyone else want to take a pass at this one? Do you measure it by, let me ask specifics. Player count, active users, money, how much money you made, how much investment, inquiry, like how many companies come to you and ask to invest in your next game. Like there are some things that you could measure success by. What's the thing that you might use to measure that success?
And like first and foremost, we just want to be proud of what we made, and how much of the kind of vision and intention that we actually realize, because if you're ambitious, it's gonna be hard, and you just want to be proud of it. And but I think yes to all those things, right? Like I mean, to just say it kind of probably too briefly, it's just like you just want people to love it, and that's it. And like however you measure that, I don't know, you're looking at review scores, you're looking at how many copies are selling, you're looking at and I mean both like kind of the traditional media reviews, but more importantly the players themselves and how they're reviewing it. And then for us, it's also like improving that over time and saying that when we patch it, or then like again with the early access period, it's like we hope the game is getting better every single release in meaningful ways that our players appreciate. But yeah, it's a kind of a soft thing, I guess. For us, it's more of like an instinctual thing, because I think if you really make a game that you're proud of and that resonates with an audience, all those other things you mentioned come, like at different levels, but it'll work out.
Yeah, awesome. Great answer. All right, listen, I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to switch over to some of the audience questions. Now, audience, thank you for putting in a bunch of stuff here. We're not going to have time to answer all of them, but I'll give you some contact information at the very end. In fact, I might put that up. No, we'll do that in a second. All right. So let me look at some of these things. How do you decide when to sunset a game post-launch and live ops? How do you balance, between the potential that game still has and a reality that, hey, it's kind of trailed off? Anyone want to answer that one?
I don't think it's smart for anybody to answer that one, by the way. No one give an answer to that.
Thank you, Neil.
No, it's hard though, right? It's hard. Sometimes you've got a game and you're kind of trying to balance that. I need to keep updating it for the players that I have, balancing against, hey, I'm building my next game, and I need to put those resources over there. At some point, there's got to be a bit of a, cost analysis of, we only now have, a handful of players, or whatever it is that's the deciding factor.
We support our games no matter how many players play it. We are here for the gamers.
No, and that's a great approach, great philosophy. Let me go way back. Any opinions on prototyping hyper casual games? Is there a different approach to different types of games, the hyper casual, casual, full on?
Yeah, like I mean, thinking about it, like prototyping a casual game sounds like so much fun. Maybe you're 5 people, and it's so much easier to communicate, and so much easier to just try a lot of different things out, because you just got to find this one core mechanic, maybe, or sounds like a fun time to me.
Mm-hmm.
You would think, but no, it's
oh, sorry, man.
No, I'm right there with you. Like, I think most people like kind of go that route, be like, oh, that sounds real chill, but like it's frustrating trying to understand what people like enjoy doing, just like mindlessly, what I'm trying to say, and what's boring.
Yeah, totally.
So I could see that being just like really rough and frustrating.
Yeah. What about thinking about the prototyping phase and pre-production sort of stuff? How do you guys make that process efficient? Do you use visual scripting? Do you use just like what do you use to make that as efficient as possible?
Can you ask that question again? Sorry.
Just talking about like prototyping and stuff, how do you make that really quick and efficient? Like, do you use something like visual scripting, or do you like just whiteboard it up? Do you mock it up in another, in InDesign, or like how do you make your prototyping as efficient as possible?
You can do paper prototyping to start with, depending on your game, really. Especially if it's turn-based, you can go paper prototyping. For anything that like you need to be an engine for, blockouts, just getting blocks to kind of move and getting the gist of it, not actually like the full functionality, but like my game, I just had like a block jumping over another block and pacing out the timing and seeing if that was fun. For me. That
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep moving on then. I have a question here about how do you, let me actually skip to another section of development. How do you balance surprises? Like, you want to make a game as a service, as an example, and it adds like a ton of systems outside the game, like telemetry for your BI, customer support systems, live op tooling, all that stuff we just talked about. How do you balance things that might pop up in things that are almost out of your control, and how do they affect your production?
Are you saying features, or also sorry?
Yeah, features, or like you want to build a game as a service, so it can be continually updated and leveraged and played in different ways. But when you do that, there are a lot of other factors involved besides just your code, your game objects and things. How do you balance those surprises in terms of a budget time up front, knowing I'm going to have a certain amount of time that I need to handle those unexpected surprises, or I just kind of let it go and then that pushes out my production life cycle? Any insight on that?
Passing it on.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have a live game, so.
Just putting up, I know we have a few minutes left, so just for the audience, I'm putting up contact information for everyone before I ask the next question. These are all Twitter handles for everyone. I threw mine up because I also have a bit of an ego. Feel free to follow, reach out to any of these people with a question that may not have been answered. But I will ask another question here, which is, different teams do QA, like playtesting differently. How do you incorporate QA into your lifecycle? Do you do it as part of production? Do you do all your production, all your building and development, and then you do QA? Do you do QA during prototyping and pre-production link? Where does QA fit into your lifecycle? Ted, do you want to comment on that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for us, at least, it does start with production. And it's staffed and handled and is a regular part of all the way through production, all the way through, for us, all the way through early access and into 1.0 and beyond. And it's a big part of it. But we do skip it in the, we absolutely love input from QA, but like how can we make this a very testable game, and how can we make them most effective later during kind of pre-production? But we really start it in earnest in the production phase.
Freddie, can I ask you to add on to that if you have anything?
I would agree with Ted. We have a similar approach in that for actually all of our projects going forward, QA starts on the same first day of production. Previously, that wasn't the case when we were just 7 people in a room, because it was just us doing QA. So it's kind of harder to just have it run alongside. But as your team gets bigger, then it's easier to have dedicated people just focusing on it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one last question before we finish off, and it's kind of an aggregation of a few, and it might be a little tricky, but do you guys do any kind of post-game analysis of how much time / money it cost you in terms of like bug fixing and addressing issues versus the actual core, what you think of as the core of building? Do you guys do anything like that to sort of then make it better for the next project?
So you're saying subtracting the cost of building the whole thing from what you made?
Yeah. So basically, how do you look at bugs and issues and like post game and say, hey, we spent 30% of our time and money on fixing bugs because we didn't pre-plan well enough, or we didn't do this prototype in a way that worked. Next project, let's do that better so we have less time, less opportunity cost of bug fixing. You guys do that kind of analysis?
Yeah, we do try to do that as much as possible. We got into Jira mid-project, Lost in Random, and started to track our progress. So it's been kind of a warm-up project for future projects, time tracking. But yeah, our dear producer Maria Svenningsson has been trying to gather all kinds of costs afterwards to just try to lay out what it cost in the end. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think a good way to phrase it would be, "Ooh, I'm never doing that again." And I think everybody's kind of seen like one bug or kind of system or something that kind of just went terribly wrong and said, "Yeah, I'm just gonna skip that next time." That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Hey, thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate your time. I know some of you it's actually late evening. Some of you it's East Coast, West Coast of the US. I appreciate all your time and answering and being so open with your processes that you do to approach game development. I hope you as an audience really enjoyed your time as well, that you got something out of this. Please, as I said, feel free to reach out to any of our guests, Neil, Freddie, Ted, and Olive, or myself, and really look forward to continuing this kind of conversation, seeing what you guys are building and the types of things that you run into that maybe we can sort of give you some advice on. So thank you very much for your attendance. Hope you all have a great day or evening. Ciao for now.
Thank you, guys.